So, Masa, I'd like to know how you became a psychologist with all the things that you uh, were were involved in. How did you have time to become the psychologist that you are today?
You know, that's a very good question.
Okay.
I want to preface it by saying, because I gave a talk at the Spiritualist Church on this whole subject, and in my talk I said, always answer yes. Because when I came here, I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know what kind of a job I was going to have. I was qualified to do nothing. I could add and subtract. I could file things because I knew the alphabet. I could type, not very well. And so I signed up with a bunch of temporary agencies and eventually, got a temporary job, from which I got fired sometime later.
Okay.
And then found another job, and then that business went bankrupt, and then I was out of a job again. So that was about 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later. And one day, whilst I was waiting to get yet another job, a phone call came, and it was one of my temporary agencies that I'd signed up with 3 years earlier. And the woman said, "Are you still looking for a job?" I said, "Well, not still, but again." And she said, "Would you go down to the convention center and type for a couple of hours at midnight? And they'll feed you breakfast." I thought, okay. I said, okay. I mean, I wasn't doing anything, and the breakfast was really a big lure. So I went down to the convention center, and I typed for a couple of hours. Basically, I didn't do anything. I just sat there. They just needed somebody, the sense of assurance that somebody is there. And then they brought me breakfast, and I left. And 2 weeks later, the same woman calls me up and says, "Well, would you be a technical typist, just part-time, temporary for a couple of weeks? They'll train." I had no idea what a technical typist was. She said, "They'll train you. It's up at General Atomic. They just want someone part-time for 2 weeks." I thought, well, part-time, 2 weeks, I can still be looking for a job. So, sure. So I went up to General Atomic. I mean, the very name scared me. And through the maze of all the buildings, and got placed in a little office with somebody else also there. And they put a page in front of me, a yellow sheet, and it had 5 columns of figures, 4 or 5 numbers on either side of the decimal point. And the heading was something foreboding, like Fort St. Vrain nuclear reactor, something. And I thought, oh my God, I have to get every number right here or this whole place is going to blow up. And so I think it took me 3 days to type that one page of numbers before I finally got all the numbers right, got the spacing right, etc. and so forth. And after 3 days, they gave me another page with 5 columns of numbers. And that went on for about 2 weeks, and they said, we'd like you to stay on another 2 weeks. And I said, okay, because I didn't have a job. And that went on, and they said, we'd like you to stay another 2 weeks. And finally, after 2 months, 2 or 3 months, they said to me, we really want you to stay here permanently. And I said, this is not my line of work. I would go home at night and I would just collapse on the sofa and fall asleep. My brain was splitting from this typing of numbers. But every week my boss would say to me, we really want you to come work here. And one day I realized that my car needed a whole new set of tires, $200 or something. And he called me in his office again. He said, we really want you to work here. And it was a bad time. Employment was bad like it is right now. And people were calling up the personnel office every day saying, did I get the job, this and that. And I felt guilty that they were asking me, but, I said.
What year was this?
This is 1977.
77.
Right. So I felt bad that I was turning down a permanent job while everybody else was trying to get hired. And the day he called me in to say, you know, we really want you to come work here, and I needed that whole new set of tires, I said to myself, it's the hand of God. I said, okay. So then I became a permanent employee, and but the work drove me crazy. I mean, it just was unbearable. So I had to find some way of entertaining myself. And I decided, since I'd had all these friends in the past that were always talking about astrology, which I really didn't give any credence to, but I'd heard so much about it, I decided I would entertain myself by doing everybody's horoscope. And due to the fact that I was a lowly clerk typist, I always get, so I volunteered for everything that would take me out of the office. Like if they needed 5 copies made of something, I'll do it, you know. If they needed something delivered to somebody, I'll do it. Whatever it was, I'll do it, because I just needed to get away from that typewriter. But this was all government work, so there was no big hurry. And so I'd stop at every office along the way and ask everybody, because they were secretaries or engineers or whoever they were. Then if I saw anybody sitting there, I'd just stop and chat, ask them when their birthday was, especially the secretaries. And then I volunteered to do everybody's horoscope. And after a while, people would come to my desk and sit down and have their horoscope done. I did the horoscope of the nuclear reactor at Fort St. Vrain and stuck it on the bulletin board. Well, at any rate, then the word got around the secretarial grapevine. So then people would call me and say, hey, would you stop by lunch hour, do my horoscope, this and that. And finally my boss said to me, you know, you ought to be charging for that. And I said, I can't charge. I mean, what do I know? I'm just making the whole thing up, you know. And so every time from then on, he bugged me as much about charging as he had bugged me about coming to work for them. And finally I gave up. Yeah, you ought to be charging. And I thought, okay, I'll charge $5. That'll satisfy him, and it's not like, you know. And then one day somebody said to me, you're not charging enough. You ought to charge $10. And so that went on for a while, and somebody said, you're not charging enough. You ought to charge at least $35.
Wow.
So at this point, the word was spreading out beyond the secretaries to like their manicurists. And one of the manicurists came to see me, and then she sent one of her clients. And then that woman sent one of her friends to check me out and see if I was really legit.
Ah.
And when I did that woman's horoscope, I said to her, you know, you ought to be in politics. With which she immediately took herself that afternoon down to the Republican Women's Center and signed up. I mean, not exactly
the politics you wanted.
Right, but still. And then she called me about a week later and said, you know, we've taken on the battered women's shelter as a project, and they're giving us a training, and would you like to come down with me, you know, for the training? I said, sure. And I went down there for the training. And the one thing that he said, time after time after time, every single time we met, was, we're a 30-day shelter. The women have no place to go when they leave here. And so what are they going to do? It's the street or go back. And what we need is a long-term shelter. So then I had a vision one morning. And in that vision, I was taking this train load of battered women out into the countryside. And it was green hills dotted with trees, rolling countryside, and it felt in here like the French countryside. And I woke up with a start, and I said, that's a hint. And I went to a San Diego County map, and I started at the northwest corner looking for a French place name, because they're all Spanish. And I just worked my way down the county, east to west, and finally, in the southeast corner, I came upon this little blue secondary road with a dot on it, Lyons. Lyon, for all those who studied French. And I said, I called up my Republican woman real estate broker, and I said, come right away. I've had this vision, we have to go out there, Lions Valley Road. So we drove out there, and it was exactly like I had seen it in my vision. These rolling hills dotted with trees, and the little dirt road finally came to a crossroads with the sign LYONS, Lions Valley Road. So that was fine, and I came back here, and shortly the phone rang, and this woman calls up, I gotta come see you. It's very important. I'm way out here, but I gotta have answers. I gotta come now. And I said, sure. So she arrives about an hour or so later, and I get her birth date information, and I go look up all her planets and everything. Nothing. My mind is an absolute blank. Nothing. There's never, there's always something to say. Nothing. So I come back up here and I say to her, I am so sorry. You told me, that it was very important, but there's nothing I can tell you. And she said, well, if you had told me anything else, I wouldn't have believed you. And
all right.
There's nothing happening in my life. Do you do anything with dreams? I said, sure. Let me tell you about a dream I had this morning. So I launch into my vision. And when I get to Lions Valley Road, she says, Lions Valley Road? I've got 40 acres for sale on Lions Valley Road.
Oh.
It turns out she's divorced her husband. She's taken back her maiden name. And the property is part of their fight. But when she tells me her husband's name, I recognize it because I met him a few years previously. So she leaves. I call him up, explain about the vision. I say, come immediately, bring your plot plans, whatever it is you got. You're trying to sell this property, blah, blah. And he says, well, all these years I've had nightmarish trespassing kinds of dreams. But just a couple of weeks ago, I had a dream that a group of women drove up in a brown station wagon, and I had a really good feeling about it. So then he comes over, and he's got his whole, deal with selling the property. It's called Sunshine Ranch, and it's this gorgeous, big, huge ranch house, 6 bedrooms. He's got a 60-foot finished outbuilding, would be perfect for, assembly type work, and 40 acres. So I call this little group of women that's been helping me, gather stuff for the shelter. One of whom is an ex-nun art therapist with a brown station wagon. And we drive out to see the property, and it is absolutely perfect. Perfect. Wow. I mean, nobody could ever find it, and it's got everything you need to be self-sustaining. So we come back here and decide, okay, we got to raise $1 million to buy it. And so what do we need to do? We need to have a garage sale so we can make $500 so we can find a lawyer to incorporate us as a nonprofit. So we do. And then we find a accountant who volunteers her services, and then we start fundraising because we've got to find this money, and keep at that for about a year. When I realized this is impossible because we don't have a shelter. Nobody's going to give us money for something that doesn't exist, but it can't exist because we don't have any money. And what we need is at least enough money for the first, the last, the utilities, food, just to get something going. And the minute we do that, we'll just rent a little house somewhere, etc. Anyway, all of that does happen. But in the trying to raise money, I realize that I need a better degree. I mean, I can't go to San Diego Gas and Electric. I figure I'll go back to school, I'll get a master's in psychology, and that'll give me the degree I need to go out and raise money.